Welcome to the weekly meeting of the Rotary Club of Jonesboro, the four-time reigning club of the year. Glad to have everybody here. Our program. So I believe I have Jill down to introduce Tommy. So Jill.
Well, Tommy Jumper is the CEO and managing member of Delta Peanut, a LLC owned by its member investors. He is a 1982 graduate of A-State with a Bachelor of Science degree in agribusiness and economics. Mr. Jumper began this endeavor after 32 years with the Jimmy Sanders Seed Production and Sales Company. He did this because he wanted to help local peanut farmers add value to their crops. And by 2019 or February 2019, he had received the required $28 million in equity from about 60 farmers or farm entities from as far north as Saxton, Missouri, and south to northern Louisiana. And once in full operation, Delta Peanut will process an estimated 90,000 tons of peanuts a year, from what I've read. So I look forward to hearing from Tommy and talk about this what most needed industry in Northeast Arkansas.
Well, thank you, Jill. I live this thing 24/7. Okay, so it's not some sort of a rehearsed or canned speech, and I'm that kind of guy that I want to answer what's on your mind. So anywhere in here, if you want to interrupt me, please do, and make this what you want it to be. But I'll kind of skip over my introduction. Jill got that exactly right. I'm a local boy from Paragould. I remember my first experience with the Rotary Club was when I was 9 years old playing Little League Baseball in Paragould, and Rotary was good enough to sponsor a team there. And you might say that that had far-reaching effects because I got to attend ASU on a baseball scholarship, and I'm not going to say that I wouldn't have found a way to have gotten an education, but I was the first in my family, and that baseball scholarship that might have started by Rotary's participation in my life at the tender age of 9 might have even played a part in me being able to advance on a larger stage. But I had experience at the Jimmy Sanders Company. I was executive vice president of their seed business that involved the manufacturing and the marketing responsibilities. So I got toward the end of my career, and that family-owned company, it was time for them to take their equity out. They sold to private equity in New York. I spent that transition period that was required of me, but I found myself in my late 50s, a little too young to retire, not wanting to relocate, and a lot of my farmer friends in our community had a real need, and not because I'm anything special, but because of the experiences that I had. I felt like it was kind of my responsibility to give back a little bit. These farmers had been raising peanuts for 6, 7, 8, 10 years. I know most of you are aware that there's a peanut facility over at Portia, west of Walnut Ridge. There's a peanut facility in Pocahontas. There were peanut facilities in Clarksdale, Mississippi. But those were buying points. There's not a shelling plant up here. And the two companies that were purchasing a few peanuts up here were Birdsong and Golden. And they're good companies, and the peanuts up here were good, but it was too expensive for them to scale up peanut production in our area because they were freighting those back to South Georgia or West Texas to be shelled. And I can just tell you that the freight from here to there on a farmer stock ton, that ton that's still in the hull, is $120 a ton. So they were never going to expand the production up here. And our farmers wanted and needed to grow more peanuts. So to leverage the acres that were available, a plant had to be built. So about peanuts, I don't know if any of you guys have farming background, or I'm sure that you have acquaintances in farms, and you'll know that today it's almost impossible to create positive cash flows on a farm with the commodities that we have outside of peanuts. Cotton is a terribly expensive crop to grow, and the pricing today won't allow margin at farm gate. Rice is the same way. Corn's not an alternative in a big scale, and neither are soybeans. So peanuts create a really good margin at the farm gate, but they're also very valuable in rotation. And at Delta Peanut, we're really strict about maintaining a strict rotation, because as long as we maintain that, what we're finding is that the next year that they raise cotton behind our peanuts, their cotton yields will be 300 to 400 pounds more than they were behind peanuts. Peanuts are just a good crop. George Washington Carver, I noticed that quote earlier, he determined that a long time ago, and it's still true. But we have abundant irrigation, and that sets us apart. When peanuts are grown under droughty conditions, they are quick to be stressed and develop a toxin, a mold, if you will, that's aflatoxin, a precursor to a carcinogen. And the food companies that buy these peanuts are extremely sensitive to aflatoxin. And because of our renewable resource water here, we're just in a whole lot better position to raise peanuts dependably every year without the threat of aflatoxin. This is a good point, maybe to interject a question. Anybody care to volunteer what their favorite brand of peanut butter is?
Jif.
Jif.
Do you know where Jif is made?
I have
No.
no idea. Better not be China.
So I'm sorry?
I said it better not be China.
No. So another thing that I harnessed up was the fact that Jif peanut butter is made in Memphis.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so think about the peanuts that had been grown here before we built a shelling plant. They were going to Portia or Pocahontas into a buying point, then to be freighted to Colquitt, Georgia, which is right on the Florida line. And then they made their way back to Memphis to be made into peanut butter. So how much, and it doesn't matter how you look at that, we carved out a 1,000-mile round trip for those peanuts. And that is just logistics dollars, but it's also a very responsible and measurable way to reduce the carbon footprint for J.M. Smucker that owns the Jif brand. Hormel is made in Little Rock. Who would have known that? The biggest co-packer in this whole business is a company called All Good Foods. And if you go into one of the grocery chains or Walmart and pick up a private label peanut butter, it's probably made in Louisville, Kentucky by All Good Foods. So not only did we harness up the natural resources that we have here, we also put ourselves in a place where we are logistically advantaged compared to our competitors. Our strengths, we're grower owned. And I'll tell you that wasn't necessarily my original idea. When I decided to build a peanut shelling plant, I thought I would just go down the typical road and go to New York, raise equity. I went to New York looking for $30 million in equity and $70 million in debt, and lo and behold, I got it. But I got back home and I thought about the far-reaching aspects of that and the unrest that it would cause 5 to 7 years after, and I decided that I would change the business model. We formed an LLC, and as Jill said, we raised our equity from farms. I'll have to say that our local lending institutions got in behind them very well because they're strapped for cash and didn't have liquidity, and they made a way that the farmers could invest up. And personally, I can't tell you how much that means to me, because I know I'm the same age as a lot of my friends who farm, and they're desperately trying to figure out how they can pass these farms on to the next generation. And unlike farms around the rest of the country, most of our farmers are not vertically integrated off the farm, and that's because of the ownership of the land, and that's just who we are. And so they've desperately been looking for that way to add some profitability back to these farms so that they could continue them in their family. And Delta Peanut kind of gives them hope, because not only now do they have the opportunity to raise a crop that's more profitable, they also get to clip a longer piece of the value chain by sharing in the profits of the manufacturing of these peanuts. So I decided that we'd set out and build ourselves a plan. The original idea was to source our equity in New York. I tried that. I didn't like that. So we went. Jill did a good job of outlining this in February of last year. I guess in January, I'd been on the road for a year or two measuring interest, and we decided that we were ready to have our initial meeting of call. And I didn't have any idea how many people would be there. I think I sent out 90 some odd email invitations, and I went over here to the First National Bank, what I still call it the Convocation Center. They were very, very gracious to help me because I told them I didn't know how many to expect. I sent out 90 invitations, and 265 people showed up. So a real validation of what I was trying to do had lots of people that wanted it to be successful. We've already gone through our second round, right according to plan. Our round two model, was modeled to raise 2.8 million. I had to cut it off because we were oversubscribing. But this past March, we added $4.5 million worth of ownership. My leadership team. I mean, I knew that I knew how to do a lot of things in this business, but I also needed to have some peanut institutional knowledge. So I made up my leadership team of a mix. I went and hired a guy named Dirk Lindsay as my COO. He had nearly 30 years worth of experience in the peanut business. He'd been from West Texas, and he'd worked in 4 different states and been to South Africa. So we've moved Dirk up here from Fairhope, Alabama, together with his family. Sarah Gifford is a lot more local young lady. She's my controller. She was commuting back and forth about an hour and a half to work, and to give her an opportunity to stay in Jonesboro where she could do what she thought was a better job of being a mommy was good. She had accounting experience in manufacturing, and I needed that because the bulk of what we do systematically looks like manufacturing. Vincent Kerprin had been with my company. He was my seed manufacturing lead. And then Deborah Bradley took early retirement from Golden Peanut, and she moved over here from Atlanta. That's the team that I put together. Now we'll get to the pictorial part. This is kind of the more fun part, okay? That was an artist concept made, I don't know, a couple of years ago of what we were building, and we used that for lots of posters. And so about 18 months after that was done, there's our campus. That's the most recent photo that I have. We're a little past that now, but that's the most recent. And for y'all that may not know where that is, that's at the corner of C.W. Post and Barnhill Roads, and to your right is oriented to the north. In the foreground here is the boundary of the city limits, marked by Barnhill Road. There's 73 acres in that, and that is kind of a hybrid in that it contains the shelling plant and the buying point. So this next picture may look a little crude, but I tried to label those for you. I think we can get it. There's a lot of work that has to be done with peanuts, and we all know that there once was a time when the global currency was really centered around cotton. Not so much now, more around fossil fuels and data, but there was a time when cotton was the currency, and we'd like to talk about cotton built the South. Well, there's a reason for that. The reason for that is that cotton, when picked from the field, has absolutely no value. it has to have a certain amount of conditioning and manufacturing, which then takes it into being textiles. And it was that manufacturing and the ancillary businesses around it that really built the South. And peanuts are that way too. It's amazing to me, just for round numbers, in the year 2020, there will be 10,000 trucks come and leave our place of business. There will be about 5,000 rail cars leave this business. Immediately to the south of that campus, there's already a firm coming to town to build much needed cold storage, not just for us, but for our community. There's a biological testing lab that's coming to town, and we're actually going to build them facilities on our property. So the kinds of businesses around this business has been astonishing to me. But at the top of your screen, you see what we call the buying point. And today, farmers are harvesting peanuts and they're bringing them into our buying point. Now, I have about 50 employees down on that end of the property today, but importantly, we created about another 40 or 50 jobs that are government jobs that the USDA employs, because the USDA is a big part of us accepting peanuts onto this property. When those peanuts come in, we check them for moisture, and then the USDA samples and grades them there on site. And once they grade them and they tell us how much form material is in them, how much moisture is in them, then we clean them or dry them, but eventually we store them in those 3 15,000-ton warehouses that you see. And if you move toward yourself, back toward the foreground, there's a 12,000-ton warehouse marked there. That's what we call the surge warehouse. That surge warehouse is what actually provides a continual flow and a steady stream of peanuts into the shelling plant to be shelled. There's a gutter under the floor of that you could drive a pickup truck through, and a belt that runs through it so that it provides that continuous flow. We shell the peanuts in the shelling plant, and then we have room ourselves for about 12 or 14 million pounds worth of peanuts in our own cold storage. We have really populated this thing with state-of-the-art kind of equipment. So unless her CEO messes this thing up, Delta Peanut has so many advantages. I talked about our irrigation. I talked about our crop rotation. I talked about our logistical advantage. We also are operating a shelling plant that, and I want to be careful when I say this, because we're going to create 130 or 40 jobs, but we also have to be sensitive to the fact that our newer, more technologically advanced shelling plant requires fewer people and less labor, which reduces our cost and it enhances our dependability. That plant has 450 electric motors in it. Every electric motor turns something or operates a piece of equipment. And because we built it when we did and where we did, every motor in that place communicates with the electrical control box and exchanges data 10 times a second over one Ethernet wire. No one else in the peanut business can have that kind of programming helping to drive these pieces of equipment as efficiently as they can. So what you see there are sizers, the process is pretty simple, but it's very, very redundant. When peanuts come into our shelling plant, the first thing we do is clean them. And they have to be super clean because on the tail end, we're very conscious of form material. And if we happen to have a cotton stalk in that farmer material, it's real easy to sort that off. But if it goes through the sheller and gets busted up into 1,000 pieces, it becomes lots of form material that gets harder for us to take out. So the first thing we do is we re-clean all that farmer stock. Then we head it toward the shellers that remove the shell from it. Now, the cool thing about a peanut plant is that there are no trash trucks that leave. we have a use for every piece of that peanut. So we're going through the aflatoxin testing now on our hulls that are going to make us a feed provider for cattle feed. The hull gets gone that way. We sort these peanuts into jumbos, mediums, splits, little bitty number ones, and then any other little broken piece that we retrieve out of this makes wildlife feed. And I'm astonished at how large globally the wildlife feed market is. So what you see is part of the equipment on the way to do that. Now, occasionally we'll have a customer that wants peanuts guaranteed to have, in effect, 0% foreign material. And they want to be able to take peanuts from our plant and go straight into their roaster and put them on a candy bar. So almost a secondary plant within the plant is what we call our bar ready line. And you can't see it real well from there, but that thing goes all the way to having a personal, a people operated hand picking table. And when we take a peanut through that secondary plant, we are guaranteeing that a customer can take that peanut straight onto their candy bar, and we've left them absolutely zero foreign material. Some of the machinery in here is extremely advanced, and some of it is 40 years old. Vibratory conveyors have been around forever. Precision sizers have been around forever. But there are 6 Sataki color sorters in there that are the latest state-of-the-art kind of optical sorters for they'll sort for anything we program them. And those pieces of machinery were $700,000 a piece. So, and there's 6 of them in there, but the way they work is just unimaginable. Peanuts flow through these things, and cameras are taking pictures of those peanuts 1,000 times per second. And if they recognize anything that we've programmed to sort out, a puff of air blows it out of the stream. And you can tell it to sort for color, you can tell it to sort for shape, you can tell it to sort for about anything you can imagine. We do have inventory on the floor. We're up and running now. The standard unit of measure on the peanut is a 2,200 pound tote, okay? And we fill those totes at the rate of about 2 per minute. And that works out very well mechanically into logistics, because a 2,200 pound tote, for those of you who may or may not be familiar with global trade, that's almost the equivalent of a metric ton. But for us here in the U.S. that trade on a short ton, 20 of those totes makes 44,000 pounds, or 1 legal truckload. So a standard unit of measure is a 2,200 pound tote. A lot size is 20 of those. One of that lots is a truckload, and generally 4 of those truckloads is a rail car. Peanuts can only stay in here for a few days because they are susceptible to mold or insects. So it's completed now, but I didn't have a recent photo. That's our cold storage. We have 14 million pounds worth of cold storage attached to that building that we keep at 36 to 38 degrees and 55 or 60% relative humidity. And so City Water, Kevin Imboden over at City Water and Light likes us a lot, because we use a lot of kilowatt hours trying to keep that cold storage cold. Kind of a funny thing, once we put cold peanuts in there, we can't take them out and ship them immediately, and this will make sense. When they're that way, not so much today, but in the middle of August, and you pull them out of cold storage and put them on a truck or a rail car, moisture will condense. And at every turn of the tap, you want to keep peanuts and moisture separate from one another. We are very, very conscious of the fact that salmonella exists, and it needs that protein source, and it needs moisture to survive. And while our customers have kill step, we don't want to be the sponsor of soil-borne pathogens like salmonella and peanut. Who is our customer? And I'll kind of try to wrap up with this so that we can take questions if you have any. But iconic brands, what we've really done is created a company where there's no gap between farmers in Arkansas, the Bootheel, and Northern Louisiana. There's no gap between them and the iconic brands like Mars Wrigley, Skippy, Jif, Hershey, Planters, and hundreds of smaller boutique kind of users. So it's been a long, hard toll. We've had everything from tornadoes to COVID to deal with, but Delta Peanut, while we experienced some construction delays like everybody else for weather, we're just about up on our skis now. And it's kind of fun to be, when I drove through the plant this morning, it's kind of neat that I looked out there and there were 8 Skippy rail cars that will be Skippy peanut butter by the weekend. If you've picked up peanut M&Ms lately, there's a good chance that some of those peanuts came from right here. Planters mixed nuts, Halloween coming up, Hershey Reese's peanut butter cups. I just did a sale yesterday that we'll put our peanuts in Snickers candy bars, and so it's kind of neat to be us. So we like being in Jonesboro. I will tell you, Jonesboro is not the easiest place to build. It's pretty difficult at times, but I'm glad we got it done, and we're proud to be a member of the community, and we think adding jobs and resources and opportunities for other people to build companies around us. So, Jill, I could go on, but I think maybe I tend to overtalk sometimes. So with that, I'll be happy to field any questions or comments.
And you did a great job. I've got a question, and there are other questions waiting in the chat box. But when you talk about cleaning the peanuts, what does that look like? What kind of what do you wash them with?
No, you do not water. You use no water. There's no water anywhere in here. So peanuts are cleaned with air and with sizing screens, with brushes, with what we call gravity table that sorts out by specific density. So the peanut inside the hull is clean, right? Our challenge is to keep them inside the hull, remove all foreign material until such time as we remove the hulls. There's a term in the peanut world called an LSK, which stands for loose shell kernel. And that's a kernel that's a peanut that fell out of the kernel before it got into the sheller. And that peanut is thrown away, or not thrown away, it's crushed for oil because it didn't stay in the protective environment of that hull long enough. So when I say cleaning, we're removing sticks, stems, leaves, weed seed, dirt, broken hulls, LSKs. We remove all of that until we're dealing with nothing but a whole kernel of peanut in a controlled environment where we shave the hull off of it.
Gotcha. And someone wanted to know, what do you do with the red skin waste?
We have very little red skin waste. That will come later. This is so neat. Another trivia fact for today: chocolate will stick to red skin on a peanut, but it will not stick to an oily peanut without the red skin on it. So we do everything we can to keep the red skins on there. Now, occasionally a customer wants a blanched peanut. And I grew up with gardener, my mom and grandmother gardened, and blanching was not like blanching tomatoes. There's no water involved. But with heat and brushes, we would take the red skins off. The next tranche of our construction will be a blanched plant, and we will intentionally remove red skins for those buyers who want blanched peanuts. But today, everything we sell is a red skin, and we don't accumulate red skin waste.
Gotcha. And then someone was wanting to know roughly how many acres are farmed in peanuts in this area? And then, what states do you receive product from?
Yeah. So today we've actually increased our production. We're going to receive about, depending on the crop yield, this harvest that's underway today, we're going to receive about 105,000 tons of peanuts. And that will be off of 39,000 acres. The vast majority, the biggest portion of all those acres are in Arkansas. And they're just east of us out here where you all know that Buffalo Island area, Lake City, Manila, Leachville, that area. And we have another pocket of peanuts down around Marianna. But one of the biggest growth areas for us, we think, is just across the state line in the Bootheel of Missouri. And we have lots of peanuts that are being raised from Hornersville, Cardwell, Zenith, Kennett, all the way, then it diminishes all the way up to Sikeston. We buy some peanuts out of Louisiana, and all of this is really intentional because to be a dependable supplier, you want to mitigate as many risks as you can. And production risks are mitigated, even though it costs me a little more freight to move peanuts from Tallulah or from Sikeston to Jonesboro. It's also a risk mitigation, and it also lengthens out the harvest season. So the majority of our 38,000 acres are probably 18 or 20 of those are just east of us out here, along 18 either side, 20 miles. Another 10,000 or 11,000 are around Marianna, and then the balance is in the Bootheel of Missouri and North Louisiana. And we actually have about 75 farm families now that have equity or ownership in this plant.
And what about for the people who have peanut allergies? Do y'all process any of the peanuts that people can eat that have peanut allergies?
No, peanuts, and there's the American Peanut Council has done lots of, I think, really valid science-based research about how to avoid that. But to those people who are allergic to peanuts, there are no peanuts that are allergen-free. Mm-hmm. So that's broad sweeping, And so a lot of the research suggests, and they're developing really good ways to introduce peanuts in small quantities to infants, and those infants then develop a tolerance to it, and they grow up with very, very, very little incidence of allergens. Now, there's another cure that could probably take place, but peanuts today, there's no such thing as any kind of genetic modification in any peanuts. And that's neither good nor bad. It's just what it is. But I would suggest everyone familiarize themselves with gene editing because I think because peanuts. We have to understand that drop for water, they are the densest amount of healthy protein and fats that any agriculture endeavor can raise. So society around the globe does well if they can participate in enjoying peanuts. But today, it's all about introducing them in small quantities to infants so that they don't develop that allergen, or wait until everybody understands and can responsibly use genetic editing to help alleviate that protein.
Gotcha.
Hey, Mr. Jumper, this is Will Branch. Sorry, Joe, I'm just going to jump in real quick.
Oh, yes.
Just going to say, as a Paragould native, it's always good to see Paragould people doing big things. You may know some of the branch crews. So anyway, proud of you for doing it.
Hey, Jill, thanks for jumping in there for me.
Okay, Gary is back.
Okay.
Marty's got a question about the cost per seed. That's come up a couple times.
Well, yeah, seed costs are are really a big portion of the production cost. And it's not because the seed itself is expensive, it's because the planting rate is extremely high. Put this in perspective, gosh, it's been a long time since I did this by pounds, but you plant an acre of cotton with about 10 pounds of seed. You plant an acre of soybeans with about 40 pounds of seed. Peanuts require 140 pounds of seed to establish a stand. So the seeding rate is high. The cost of peanut seed to our growers is usually in the mid 80 cents per pound. Call it 85 cents a pound, and that is with the seed and the seed treatments. So while it's relatively inexpensive per pound, the seeding rate makes it a big portion of the production cost on a peanut. Now, there's another unique thing about Delta Peanut. So peanut seed is public, and like soybeans and rice and all those crops used to be when I first started in the seed business, the varieties that are used are developed in the university system, so they're public. And so a company like Delta Peanut does its own seed production. We raise, we get seed every year, what we call the foundation generation, and then we increase that to registered and to certified, and we sell internally to our own growers, okay? So it's not going to take y'all very long at all to figure out that Delta Peanut owners' end game net cost is whatever it costs to produce that. Irregardless what we sell it to ourselves for, our business model distributes all of our cash earnings. We hold it a year in arrears and they get it all back anyway. And so that's another really distinct advantage that the Delta Peanut owners enjoy. Will be a seed cost that in eventuality will be half of what a normal grower would experience.
Why is it difficult to build in Jonesboro?
Because they do a really good job of enforcing codes, ordinances, and regulations.
You are quite the diplomat.
Well stated.
That was a good answer.
Well, and I don't want to turn this political, but I happen to be actually with my little brother that some of y'all know. I happened to be in a hospital room with him about 3 or 4 weeks ago. He's okay, but I was bored to death because he was sitting there sleeping, and I flipped on the TV and I saw a city council meeting, and I've never heard people talk about me so ugly. I mean, it was all over a sidewalk. And so I just don't want to turn that way, but I don't want to build a sidewalk. I do not want to build a sidewalk, period. And the reason I don't want to build a sidewalk is not the money. It's already budgeted in and done. But I don't want to invite children on skateboards, roller skates, and bicycles onto a three-quarter of a mile sidewalk that's going to cross 3 motor vehicle crossings, 2 railroad tracks, and be a lure because Mr. Branch is from Paragould. I lived out in the country and I lived on a gravel road. So when I was growing up, it didn't do me any good to have a skateboard until my neighbor, Norman Kelly, paved his driveway. And I went up and asked him, could I borrow somebody's skateboard and play on his driveway? And he said, sure. And it wasn't 30 minutes. They were carrying me to the hospital with a broken arm. I just don't want to get someone hurt. And that's all there is to it. And so but I will tell you this, they have been good to work with. We have learned a lot. They have not done anything except enforce what are ordinances and codes. And one of my best friends in the world now has become, Jason Wills has become one of my best friends in the world as fire marshal, because even though his job, when we figured out that we all want the same thing, and we learned to work together, and Mark Young has been tremendous to help me. like y'all, and I'll solicit your prayers for the mayor. But it's not the easiest place to understand the landscape as you try to build these things toward code.
All right. Any other questions for Tommy?
Thank you.
If I had it to build over, I'd build it in Jonesboro again, though. Okay.
That's great. Love to hear that. And whatever jobs you create above what you've already got, you mentioned 130 something eventually in that ballpark. That is just going to be super for our community and for Northeast Arkansas.
Well, you know, and so right now, several of y'all are probably business owners too, and it's always difficult to get those positions filled.
Mm-hmm.
And as a startup, there's a lot of excitement. So we're plodding along, but we still have a second shift to try to get filled. We're struggling trying to get all those positions filled. So we'll get there, though. We'll get there.
This is one of the best programs we've had in a while. It's very, very informative, and I appreciate you for being here.
Well, thank you, sir. You know, it's kind of easy to talk about something that you're passionate about and that you know about. I got to tell y'all one more thing before. I'm so proud of my team, because we really can't commercialize peanuts on a big scale until we pass a food safety audit. And those are excruciating now. And normally you have to get your plant up and running, record everything that you do, have your plans built, and then it takes a minimum of 90 days. Well, rejoice with me that my team has now concluded their first food safety BRC audit. And not only did they do that in 35 days, Delta Peanut received a grade of an A on her first audit. So we're marching right along, and that's a big inflection point in our company, because you might want to know that along with those brands that I flashed up on the screen a little bit ago, we've done domestic business already with lots and lots of smaller brands from California to Boston, but we've also sold peanuts into China, India, Mexico, Germany, the UK, and France. So little old peanuts are leaving Jonesboro, and you're affecting the globe.
Yes, Tommy, thank you for joining us, taking the time to present that to us. It was a great presentation. A lot of good information.